In our news tonight, the Arab League Council permanent members draft a number of resolutions to the foreign ministers' meeting, which convenes tomorrow on a range of regional issues. The fifth round of Syria peace talks resumes in Geneva, with the opposition and government delegations taking part to broker a political end to the six-year conflict. And the third annual Teacher Skills Forum kicks off, focusing this year on restructuring the way educators teach to enrich their students' learning experiences. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. The Arab League Council permanent representatives met today by the Dead Sea shores to discuss the region's political, diplomatic and security issues, to present their recommendations to the foreign ministers' meeting, which convenes tomorrow. The meeting convened in the presence of the Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait, as well as senior officials and ambassadors of the League members. At the outset of the meeting, Jordan's permanent representative to the Arab League, Ambassador Ali Al-Ayed, received the Council's presidency from Mauritania's representative Widadi Wield Sidi Hiba, who expressed hopes for a successful Arab Summit meeting in Jordan. The Council is the Arab League's highest body, comprising representatives of member states, usually foreign ministers, their representatives or permanent delegates. Al-Ayed presented the meeting with Jordan's stand on the various regional issues, namely the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the war against Daesh. The meeting also attempted to set a date for the 29th summit meeting. The outcome of today's meeting were a number of draft resolutions deliberated by the permanent representatives to be presented to the foreign ministers' meeting. The draft resolutions address the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, solidarity with Lebanon, developments in Syria, especially in light of the continued refugee crisis, as well as the situation in Libya and Yemen. The permanent representatives also drafted resolutions on Iran's occupation of 3 Arab Gulf islands, Turkey's violations of Iraq's sovereignty, as well as on a number of pan-Arab issues, including Arab national security, the war on terror, and the prospect of convening a periodic Euro-Arab summit. The foreign ministers' meeting tomorrow sets the stage for the 28th Ordinary Arab Summit, which opens on Tuesday. Speaking at a news conference by the Dead Sea, Minister of Media Affairs Mohammed Al-Momeni said Jordan has succeeded in reducing the digital content by Daesh supporters on social media by 75%, closing some 400 accounts on Twitter alone. Momeni said there exists an Arab consensus about combating terrorism and extremist ideologies, noting the participation of several Arab states in military action against terror groups. However, he urged continued resistance against terror thugs through such measures as drying up their financial resources and obstructing their passage through Arab borders. Momeni was briefing the media on the day's Arab League's permanent members' deliberations, providing an update on the summit meeting. He said UN envoy for Syria Staffan de Mistura will attend the foreign ministers' meeting tomorrow to update the delegates on the ongoing Geneva peace talks, while representatives from the United States, Russia and France will be taking part in the summit's opening session on Tuesday. An unfortunate road accident has killed 4 Jordanian pilgrims in Saudi Arabia on their way back to Jordan after performing Umrah. According to a foreign ministry statement, the 4 were killed when their bus overturned in Tabuk last night. The ministry spokesperson Sabah Al-Rafi'i said 4 others were injured in the accident and were to be transferred back home today, while arrangements to transfer the bodies of the 4 pilgrims are underway. Rafi'i voiced appreciation for the Saudi authorities for the medical care and attention given to the pilgrims. Over to the Syria crisis. The 5th round of Syria peace talks resumed in Geneva today in a bid to broker a political end to the 6-year Syrian conflict. The Syrian opposition delegation, headed by Nasr al-Hariri, arrived for a bilateral meeting with the United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura. Earlier, de Mistura met with the Syrian government delegation for a 2-hour-long meeting. There were no briefings following the meeting either by the Special Envoy or the head of delegation, Bashar al-Ja'fari. The talks are meant to address the construction of a transitional authority, setting a schedule and process for drafting a new constitution, holding elections, and fighting terrorism in Syria. However, yesterday, de Mistura said he wasn't expecting any breakthrough, but hoped for, in his own words, incremental steps. He also called on Russia, Iran, and Turkey to convene new Syria ceasefire talks in Astana as soon as possible to bring what he described as the worrisome situation on the ground under control. On the ground in Syria, meanwhile, the army is making new advances. The Syrian army and its allies retook a village near Hama in its effort to turn back a major rebel offensive. They are seeking to staunch the biggest rebel assault in months, which began this week in the capital Damascus and the Hama countryside. In Homs, a senior Syrian official said Syrian rebels resumed their evacuation as part of a deal to surrender the city's last insurgent pocket of Al-Wa'ir to the government. The evacuation will continue for another 2 days. Elsewhere in the country, in the rebel-held Idlib province, a war monitor said an overnight strike killed at least 16 people when it hit a prison. Idlib is one of the most important strongholds of the rebel groups, including Daesh terrorists. To Iraq, where a high rate of civilian casualty in Mosul has forced the Iraqi army to make a pause in their push to recapture the western part from Daesh. Residents escaping the besieged area are speaking of airstrikes demolishing buildings and killing numerous civilians. They say the terrorists have been using civilians as human shields, opening fire on them as they try to escape. The U.S. military today acknowledged that U.S. aircraft struck at the request of Iraqi forces a location in West Mosul where dozens of civilian casualties occurred. In a statement, the U.S. Central Command said it has opened an investigation to determine the facts surrounding the strike and the validity of reports of civilian casualties. The U.S.-backed offensive to drive Daesh out of Mosul is now in its 6th month. The entire eastern side and about half of the west is under Iraqi control. The United Nations expressed profound concern over reports of massive destruction and a high number of civilian casualties in a coalition strike in Mosul. The humanitarian coordinator for Iraq, Lise Grande, said in a statement, "We are stunned by this terrible loss of life." 4 U.S.-made F-16 fighter jets, meanwhile, landed at Balad Air Base north of Baghdad. Iraq received the 4 fighter jets under a contract concluded between the government and the United States. The new jets bring the number of aircraft received by Iraq to 18 out of 36 fighter jets the U.S. agreed to sell to Baghdad. The new batch of F-16 fighter aircraft arrive at a time the Iraqi army is waging ferocious battles to dislodge Daesh from Mosul. 4 Egyptian soldiers were killed in an explosion targeting their armored vehicle in the northern Sinai Peninsula. The explosion occurred south of the Mediterranean town of Al-Arish, where the government is battling a Daesh insurgency. Just on Thursday, 10 soldiers were killed also in the Sinai Peninsula when their vehicles were hit by 2 improvised bombs during an operation in which 15 suspected terrorists were killed. Back here at home, and the 3rd annual Teacher Skills Forum kicked off today with this year's focus on restructuring the way educators teach to enrich their students' learning experiences. The forum is organized by the Queen Rania Teacher Academy in partnership with the International Baccalaureate Program. Besides the participation of distinguished world education figures, this year's forum welcomed over 900 participants from various Arab countries, as well as Mexico, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Speaking at the opening session, Her Majesty Queen Rania encouraged educators to redefine their roles as leaders of hope, calling on them to instill values of peace and coexistence in their students to face today's challenges. Her Majesty also referred to teachers as the greatest investment during times of regional turmoil.
We believe that our greatest impact has been our emphasis on the importance of teacher training and preparation, and our dedication to promoting teaching as a long-term career rather than a regular job. The more equipped a teacher is with skills and tools, the more solid and innovative his teaching will be. Visions without carefully devised plans are mere dreams, prone to dissipation in the face of tough challenges.
European Union leaders have stressed the need for unity on the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. At a celebration on the Capitoline Hill in Rome, where the 6 original states signed the treaty on the 25th of March 1957, all 27 leaders put their names to a declaration of unity. The celebratory summit comes as the EU faces a range of challenges, including Brexit and the rise of populist parties. On the streets of Rome, meanwhile, there was a European Union protest to suit all walks of life. Federalists, nationalists, populists, unionists, and anarchists headed to 6 rallies and demonstrations. Here's more.
Gathering in Rome to celebrate the 60th birthday of the European Union's founding treaty, but without Britain. EU leaders from 27 member states gathering at the Campidoglio Palace, determined to demonstrate that the bloc can survive the impending departure of the major power, renewing their commitment to what EU Chief Claude Juncker called an undivided and indivisible union, and promising a vision for the next 10 years. Yet faced with tens of thousands of anti-EU protesters gathering beyond the tight police cordon. It was here the 6 founding states signed the Treaty of Rome on the 25th of March 1957. Having joined in 1973, Britain will officially confirm its withdrawal on Wednesday. Without this so-called looming Brexit, it might have been a modestly hopeful summit. All 28 EU economies are growing after a slump that's blighted the past decade, and recent border chaos has largely abated, as refugees are, for now, being held in check. But Brexit has undermined the self-confidence of a union that's helped bring peace and growing prosperity to the continent, and has encouraged Eurosceptic nationalists to challenge governments across the bloc. At the Vatican on Friday, Pope Francis told EU leaders that their union had achieved much in 60 years. He warned, though, that Europe faced a vacuum of values, and condemned anti-immigrant populism and extremism that he said posed a mortal threat to the bloc. The Rome Declaration, signed by the 27, offers ringing phrases about peace and unity. We have united for the better, the text concludes. Europe is our common future. In it, they promise to listen to their citizens, but locked away behind rings of armed police, the leaders may hear little of what these thousands of protesters have to say.
The Russian Knights aerobatics team showed off its new routine at Malaysia's Langkawi International Maritime and Airspace Exhibition. Organizers say the exhibition this year has far exceeded its visitor target, achieving more than 200,000 on the final day of the event. Since its opening on Tuesday in the Malaysian island, a total of 55 vessels comprising 16 naval warships from abroad and 39 vessels from the Royal Malaysian Navy and local agencies were on display. The Russian Air Force's Russian Knights aerobatics team were the highlight of the last day, premiering their new Sukhoi 30 SM fighter jets and new routine. The Russians are one of few aerobatic teams around the world that fly aircraft that completely retain combat capabilities. On the 10th anniversary of Earth Hour, the lights of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House were switched off today to mark the event. Electric lights in 7,000 cities across 172 countries are expected to be turned off to focus public attention on the issue of climate change and to save a few megawatts in the process. The event, which originated in Sydney in 2007, has grown to become a worldwide environmental campaign celebrated across all continents. From the land down under, the event will also be marked throughout Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Monuments, including the Empire State Building, the Kremlin, Big Ben, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Eiffel Tower, Egypt's pyramids, and Burj Khalifa, are all scheduled to switch off. And celebrations are underway for the Disneyland Paris 25th anniversary. Classic characters like Mickey and Minnie Mouse danced and sang in front of visitors in a grand parade. The popular Disneyland tourist resort located in Chessy, just outside Paris, opened its doors on April 12, 1992, and since then has welcomed thousands of visitors each year. Disneyland Paris employs 15,000 cast members, and according to the chairman of Walt Disney Parks and Resorts, the resort has generated nearly 70 billion euros over the past 25 years.
Nice surprise.
In tennis, second-seeded Kei Nishikori of Japan got past Kevin Anderson of South Africa 6-4, 6-3 in yesterday's ATP action of the Miami Open. Nishikori did not face a break point in the match and won 88% of his first serve points. Third-seeded Milos Raonic of Canada advanced with a 6-3, 7-5 victory over Viktor Troicki of Serbia. This was Raonic's first match since suffering a right leg injury last month. Raonic's third-round opponent is American qualifier Jared Donaldson.
Thanks so much, Raonic.
Fifth-seeded Rafael Nadal of Spain got past Dudi Sela of Israel 6-3, 6-4. Nadal completed the match in 1 hour, 20 minutes. Seventh-seeded Marin Cilic of Croatia was beaten by Jeremy Chardet of France, whose 6-4, 2-6, 6-3 victory presented his first win over Cilic since 2009. Chardet's next opponent will be Fabio Fognini of Italy. Running of the brides in Thailand saw 250 couples race in a 4 kilometers run to win the first prize worth around $28,000 to fund their wedding. Holding weddings can cost a lot of money, and so the couples were hoping an impressive running performance might see them come first in the race and pay for their big day. The race was won by the couple Sirada Tamwana and her soon-to-be groom Siti Chai Prasongsin. And finally, the weather outlook. It remains cold in the hilly areas and Badia for the rest of tonight, with northwesterly light winds. Tomorrow, spring conditions prevail across the kingdom, with temperatures in Amman hitting 20 degrees Celsius, accompanied by southwesterly moderate winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a cool night and warm day tomorrow, with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Before we end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. The Arab League Council permanent members draft a number of resolutions to the foreign ministers' meeting, which convenes tomorrow on a range of regional issues. The fifth round of Syria peace talks resumes in Geneva, with the opposition and government delegations taking part to broker a political end to the 6-year conflict. And the third annual Teacher Skills Forum kicks off, focusing this year on restructuring the way educators teach to enrich their students' learning experiences. With this, we end tonight's news. I'm Dana Abusham. Thanks for watching and have a good night.